The Epic of Gilgamesh, written in ancient Mesopotamia. This edition is adapted into clear, modern English, choosing content over play of words, designed for language learners and casual listeners who want to enjoy the story without grueling language barriers.
Chapter 1: The Wild Man of the Forest. Long ago in the ancient land of Mesopotamia, there stood the magnificent city of Uruk. It was a city of great beauty, with busy marketplaces, beautiful gardens, and towering temples. Surrounding the city were massive stone walls, so strong and high that they looked like they had been built by the gods. Ruling over this great city was King Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was no ordinary king. The gods had created him to be 2/3 god and 1/3 human. He was taller, stronger, and more handsome than any ordinary man. His eyes could see everything, and his arms possessed the strength of a wild bull. He built Uruk's mighty walls to keep his people safe, and he built the glorious temple of Ina to honor the gods. But Gilgamesh was also a very proud and harsh ruler. Because he was so strong and powerful, he believed he could do whatever he wanted. He ruled Uruk with an iron fist, leaving no peace for his people. He forced the young men of the city to work day and night, carrying heavy stones and building the city walls until their bodies were exhausted. He took daughters away from their families and brides away from their husbands, claiming that everything in Uruk belonged to him. The people of Uruk suffered under his rule. In their distress, they cried out to the gods for help. "O gods," they prayed, "you created this mighty king, but he has become a tyrant. He is like a wild bull and we have no rest. Please hear our cries and help us." The gods in heaven heard the prayers of the people. They looked down on Uruk and saw the suffering of its citizens. They decided that Gilgamesh needed to learn humility. They summoned Araru, the goddess of creation, who had shaped the first humans. "Araru," the god said, "you created Gilgamesh. Now create his equal. Create a rival who is strong enough to stand up to him. Let them clash so that Gilgamesh may meet his match and learn peace, and the people of Uruk may finally rest." Araru listened to the gods. She took a piece of clay, moistened it with her sacred water, and threw it into the wild grasslands far away from the city. From that clay, she shaped a wild man. His name was Enkidu. Enkidu was completely different from the people of Uruk. His body was covered in thick, shaggy hair, and he had long, wild hair on his head. He knew nothing of human language, clothing, or houses. He lived deep in the wild forest, running with the animals. He ate sweet grass with the gazelles, drank water from the rivers with the cattle, and bathed in the watering holes. He was a creature of the wild, and the beasts of the forest accepted him as their friend. Enkidu was so strong that he could run as fast as the wind, and he protected the wild animals from human traps. One day, a local hunter went to the watering hole to set his traps. As he waited in the bushes, he saw Enkidu arriving with the animals. The hunter watched in amazement as the wild man easily pulled his metal traps out of the ground and filled in his pits, allowing the gazelles to escape safely. The hunter was filled with terror. He had never seen a man so wild and powerful. He ran back to his home, trembling with fear. He told his father,
"Father, there is a giant wild man in the hills. He runs with the animals, eats grass, and destroys my traps. I am too afraid to hunt."
His father replied,
"My son, go to Uruk and tell King Gilgamesh about this wild man. The king is the strongest man in the land. Ask him for help."
The hunter traveled to the city of Uruk. He stood before King Gilgamesh and described the wild man of the forest. Gilgamesh listened to the hunter's story. Instead of sending his soldiers, the king smiled and said,
"Go to the temple of Ishtar and find Shamhat, the wise and beautiful priestess. Take her with you to the watering hole. When the wild man comes, let Shamhat speak to him. She will teach him the ways of humans, and the animals will no longer accept him."
The hunter did as the king commanded. He took Shamhat by the hand and they traveled deep into the wilderness. For 3 days they walked until they reached the watering hole. They sat down by the water and waited. On the 3rd day the animals came to drink, and among them was Enkidu. When Enkidu saw Shamhat, he stopped. He had never seen a human woman before. Shamhat spoke gently to Enkidu, showing no fear. She walked toward him and sat with him under the shade of the trees. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat remained with Enkidu in the wilderness. She spoke to him in the human tongue, teaching him the first words of language. She showed him kindness, and she shared her knowledge of the civilized world. As the days passed, a great change came over Enkidu. His mind began to wake up. He learned to understand the words of Shamhat, and his heart grew warm with human feelings. On the 7th day, Enkidu turned back toward the watering hole to see his animal friends. But when the gazelles saw him, they grew afraid and ran away. The wild cattle fled into the forest. Enkidu tried to run after them, but he found that his legs were heavy and he could no longer run like the wind. He had lost his wild speed, but he had gained something far greater, a human mind, a warm heart, and the power of speech. He walked back to Shamhat and sat at her feet. He looked at her and said,
"The animals have fled. I am alone."
Shamhat smiled and touched his hand.
"You are not alone, Enkidu."
She said,
"Look at yourself. You are wise and you are like a god. Why do you want to live in the dirt with the wild beasts? Come with me. Let me lead you to Uruk of the plazas, the great city of broad streets. Let me take you to the king, Gilgamesh. He is the strongest man in the world, but he rules with a harsh hand. You are strong enough to be his equal. You will teach him peace."
Enkidu listened to her words. He felt a deep desire for friendship, and he agreed to follow her to the city. Shamhat tore her garment in two, wrapping one half around Enkidu to cover his nakedness and keeping the other half for herself. Then she led him toward the land of humans. Chapter 2: The Great Battle and Friendship. As Shamhat and Enkidu traveled toward the city of Uruk, they first stopped at a shepherd's camp. The shepherds gathered around in excitement. They had never seen a man who looked so strong and wild. They offered Enkidu food and wine, but Enkidu did not know how to eat bread or drink wine, for he had only known the milk of wild beasts. Shamhat showed him how to eat and drink, and Enkidu ate until he was full and drank 7 cups of wine. His heart felt light, and he sang with joy. The shepherds then shaved his wild hair and rubbed sweet-smelling oil on his skin, dressing him in clean clothes. Enkidu looked like a civilized man, and that night he stayed awake to protect the shepherd's sheep from the lions. The next day, Enkidu and Shamhat finally arrived at the gates of the great city of Uruk. The streets were filled with people, and a grand feast was being prepared. The citizens gathered around Enkidu, whispering in astonishment. "He looks just like our king. He is slightly shorter, but his chest is broader and his muscles are like stone. He is surely a match for Gilgamesh." As Enkidu walked through the plazas, he heard the people talking about Gilgamesh's harsh laws. The citizens told him that the king was going to enter a wedding house to claim the bride before her new husband could touch her. This was the king's custom, and no one dared to stop him. When Enkidu heard this, his heart burned with anger.
"This is not right."
Enkidu said,
"A king should protect his people, not cause them grief. I will stand in his way. I will challenge him, and he will see that there is someone in the world as strong as he is."
That evening, Gilgamesh marched proudly down the street toward the wedding house. He wore his royal robes and a golden crown, and the people bowed their heads as he passed. But when he reached the doorway of the house, he found Enkidu waiting for him. Enkidu did not bow. He stood firmly in the doorway, blocking the entrance with his massive body.
"Step aside."
Gilgamesh commanded, his voice cold with anger.
No one blocks the path of the king.
I will not move.
Enkidu replied, looking straight into the king's eyes.
Your rule is too harsh, and you have no right to enter this house.
Gilgamesh was furious. He lunged forward and the two giants clashed in the middle of the street. They grappled like wild bulls, locking arms and throwing each other against the stone walls. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the wooden doors of the houses shattered as they wrestled. Up and down the streets of Uruk they fought, their muscles straining under the heavy blows. The citizens watched in terror and wonder, for no one had ever stood against Gilgamesh for so long. Finally, after a long and grueling struggle, Gilgamesh managed to throw Enkidu to the ground. But instead of continuing the fight, Gilgamesh stopped. He looked at Enkidu, who was panting but still looking back at him with fierce courage. Gilgamesh realized that this wild man was his true equal, someone who could share his strength and understand his heart. Gilgamesh reached down and offered his hand.
Rise, my brother,
He said, his anger replaced by a warm smile.
you are indeed the strongest warrior I have ever met.
Enkidu took his hand and stood up. He embraced Gilgamesh, and they swore an oath of eternal friendship. From that day on, they were inseparable, living together in the royal palace and sharing everything. But after some time in the palace, Enkidu began to grow sad. His limbs felt heavy, and he missed the active life of the wilderness. Seeing his friend's sorrow, Gilgamesh proposed a great adventure to lift his spirits.
My brother,
Gilgamesh said,
in the mountains of the west lies the sacred Cedar forest. It is guarded by the terrible monster Huwawa, whose voice is like a flood and whose breath is fire. Let us go there together, cut down the sacred trees, and rid the world of this monster. If we succeed, our names will be remembered for all time, and if we fall, we will at least leave behind a legendary name.
Enkidu shook his head, warning his friend.
I know that forest, Gilgamesh. When I lived with the wild animals, I traveled near its borders. The forest is dark and endless, and the god Enlil appointed Huwawa to guard it with sevenfold terrors. It is too dangerous.
Do not speak of danger, Enkidu.
Gilgamesh replied with fire in his eyes.
Only the gods live forever, our lives are short, and we must make our deeds count. Let us go.
Enkidu saw the determination in his friend's heart and agreed to go. The two friends went to the armorers of Uruk, who forged giant bronze axes and heavy spears for their journey. The elders of the city gathered to bless their quest, praying that the sun god Shamash would watch over them. Chapter 3: The Battle in the Cedar Forest. Gilgamesh and Enkidu set out on their long journey to the west. The road was long and difficult, winding through rugged mountains and crossing swift-flowing rivers. But the two friends walked with incredible speed, traveling in just a few days what would take ordinary men months to complete. Each evening, as the sun went down, they pitched their camp and prepared for the night. To ensure they had the blessing of the gods, Gilgamesh climbed to the top of the ridges and poured out fine flour to the earth, praying.
O mountain, bring me a dream, a favorable sign from the gods.
Each night Gilgamesh fell into a deep sleep and experienced strange, vivid dreams. In one dream, a giant mountain collapsed over them, trapping them in darkness. In another dream, a wild bull attacked him with a fiery breath, shaking the earth, but a mysterious figure brought him water and saved him. Each morning, Gilgamesh woke up trembling and told Enkidu his dreams. Enkidu, who understood the secrets of the wild, interpreted the dreams with a warm smile.
Do not fear, my friend.
Enkidu said,
The falling mountain means we will defeat the giant Huwawa and cast his body down. The wild bull is the sun god Shamash, who will protect us and send help in our hour of need. The figure who brought you water is your protective deity. The gods are blessing our path.
With these words, Gilgamesh's courage was renewed and they pushed forward. At last, they reached the majestic cedar forest. The trees were tall, green, and beautiful, casting a cool shade over the forest floor. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of cedar wood, and the singing of birds echoed through the branches. The two friends stood at the edge of the forest, looking in awe at the home of the gods. Gilgamesh raised his heavy bronze axe. With a mighty swing, he struck the trunk of a towering cedar tree. The forest shook. The ground rumbled as if an earthquake had struck. Deep within the trees, a terrible roar echoed. It was Huwawa, the guardian of the forest. The giant monster emerged from the trees, his face twisted in fury and his eyes flashing with destructive energy. His body was covered in thick scales, and he carried 7 protective auras that made him look like a burning fire.
Who has entered my forest?
Huwawa roared, his voice like a flood.
Who has dared to touch my sacred trees? I will tear your limbs apart and feed your flesh to the birds of prey.
Enkidu's heart filled with fear, and his limbs trembled.
My friend.
Enkidu whispered.
He is too powerful. We cannot win this fight.
But Gilgamesh called out.
Stand strong, my brother. Remember our oath of friendship. Together, 2 brothers cannot be defeated. We will stand together and face this monster.
The 2 heroes rushed forward. Gilgamesh swung his heavy axe and Enkidu thrust his bronze spear. Huwawa fought back with savage fury, throwing giant stones and knocking them to the ground. The battle raged through the cedar grove, crushing the smaller trees and shaking the mountains. Seeing the danger his heroes were in, the sun god Shamash looked down from heaven. He unleashed 13 powerful winds, tempests, hurricanes, sandstorms, and icy blasts, and directed them straight at Huwawa. The winds blinded the monster with dust and trapped him in place, making it impossible for him to move or strike back. Huwawa fell to his knees, his physical strength failing him. He looked at Gilgamesh with tears in his eyes and begged for mercy.
Gilgamesh.
Huwawa pleaded.
Spare my life. If you let me live, I will be your loyal servant. I will build you a magnificent palace out of the finest cedars, and all the treasures of this forest will be yours. Please, show mercy.
Gilgamesh hesitated. His heart was moved by the monster's tears, and he looked at Enkidu.
Should we let him go, my brother? He offers to serve us.
But Enkidu warned him quickly.
Do not listen to his words, Gilgamesh. If you spare his life, he will betray us the moment our backs are turned. He is a monster of Enlil, and if he lives, the gods will punish us. We must finish this battle now.
Huwawa glared at Enkidu in anger, realizing his fate. Gilgamesh raised his bronze blade and struck a final, decisive blow. Enkidu struck with his spear, and together they defeated the guardian of the forest. With the monster slain, the 2 friends set to work. They cut down the tallest cedar trees in the grove, preparing the giant logs to float down the river to Uruk. They built a grand wooden gate for the city temple, proving to the world that they had conquered the terrors of the cedar forest.